"You're just a burden now, Mom." He didn't shout. That's what I remember most. He didn't need to raise his voice. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Heavy, deliberate, and impossible to retrieve. His wife glanced at him with something that might have been approval. The grandchildren, my grandchildren, looked down at their plates. And I sat there, fork in hand, feeling the warmth drain from the room like light leaving a room when someone closes the blinds. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I had spent 30 years crying for this boy. Over scraped knees and broken hearts, over report cards and college acceptance letters, over the day he moved out and the day he got married. I had cried enough tears to fill the space between us. But at that moment, something inside me went quiet. Not sad, not angry. Quiet. The way a house goes quiet after a long storm, when the wind finally stops and you realize the walls are still standing. I folded my napkin. I placed it beside my plate. I looked at my son one more time. Really looked. And I saw someone I didn't recognize. Not the boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. Not the young man who called me every Sunday just to hear my voice. This was a stranger wearing my son's face, and somewhere in the years of giving, I had forgotten to notice him changing. "Excuse me," I said, and I stood up. I walked to the front door. I put on my coat. I stepped out into the November cold. No one followed me. No one called my name. The door closed behind me, and for a moment I stood on the porch and listened to the laughter start again inside. That was the sound of my old life ending. I just didn't know it yet. My name is Eleanor Graham. I was a nurse for 34 years, not because I dreamed of it as a girl. I dreamed of open fields and a house by the water, of quiet mornings and the sound of my children laughing. But life, as it does, had other plans. My husband, Thomas, died when our son, Mark, was 7 years old. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday. The kind of phone call that splits your life into before and after. I remember standing in the hospital corridor that night, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and making a promise. Mark would never want for anything. He would have the childhood I couldn't give him alone. He would go to college, buy a house, raise a family. I would make sure of it. I would give him everything Thomas and I had dreamed of giving him together. And I did. For 30 years, I did. I worked double shifts through my 40s. I worked holidays, weekends, birthdays. When other nurses went out for drinks after their shifts, I went home to make dinner. When they took vacations to Florida or the Caribbean, I picked up extra hours. My shoes wore thin, my back ached. My hands, which had once been soft, grew rough from washing and scrubbing and holding the hands of people who were dying. But I never minded. That's the truth. I never minded because I was building something. Every paycheck was a brick in Mark's future. Every saved dollar was a door I was opening for him. I didn't buy new clothes. I drove the same car for 17 years. I ate leftovers for dinner more nights than I can count. And when Mark came home with good grades, when he got his first job, when he brought home the girl who would become his wife, I told myself it was all worth it. The checks started small: summer camp, tutoring, a new computer when his school required one. But they grew. College tuition, 4 years, full price, because I wanted him to have the best. His wedding, the country club, the flowers, the band his wife insisted on, the down payment on their first house, the down payment on their second house, the one with the marble countertops and the finished basement, and the yard where my grandchildren would learn to ride bikes. I signed my name so many times I stopped thinking about what it cost. Not just the money, though God knows I worked for every cent, but the pieces of myself I gave away with each signature. The vacations I never took, the books I never read, the quiet mornings I never had because I was already at work, already tired, already pouring myself into someone else's life. People told me I was doing too much. My sister called it martyrdom. My friends said I needed to think about my own retirement, my own future. But I didn't listen. Love meant sacrifice. That's what my mother taught me. That's what I believed with my whole heart. You give until there's nothing left to give, and then you find a little more somewhere because that's what mothers do. I believed that until I was sitting at that dinner table, listening to my son call me a burden. "You're the best mom in the world," he said, and I believed him. I remembered the day they moved in. Boxes everywhere. Sarah directing the movers, Mark carrying furniture up the stairs. The children, Emma and James, then 5 and 3, running through the empty rooms, their laughter bouncing off the walls. I stood in the kitchen and watched them make a home out of the house I had helped buy, and I felt something I rarely allowed myself to feel. Pride. Not pride in the money was just paper. Pride that I had done it, that I had kept my promise to Thomas, to myself, to that small boy who had lost his father too young. Mark had a home, a real home, and I had given it to him. Every Sunday, I drove 30 minutes to their house. I brought a pie or a casserole, whatever I had time to make. I set the table, I helped with the dishes, I told stories about Mark when he was small. The time he tried to teach our dog to read, the Christmas he wrapped empty boxes because he wanted us to have presents. The summer, he learned to ride a bike and didn't stop for hours because he was too happy to get off. The children loved those stories. At first, they would climb into my lap, ask for more, beg me to tell them about their father when he was their age. I told them everything I could remember, every small moment I had saved in the years since Thomas died. It felt like I was giving them something no one else could. A history, a connection, a family that stretched backward as well as forward. But somewhere along the way, the stories stopped being welcome. I noticed it slowly. The way Sarah would look at her watch when I started talking, the way Mark would interrupt with something about work or school or the children's schedules. The stories that had once brought laughter began to bring silence. Not hostile exactly, just uninterested, as if the history I was trying to preserve was nothing more than noise. I told myself they were busy. Young families had so much to manage. I was retired now, with nothing but time. Of course I wanted to talk about the past. They were living in the present. It wasn't rejection, it was just life. I believed that for a long time. The last Sunday was different. I knew it as soon as I walked through the door. Sarah barely looked up from her phone when I arrived. Mark kissed my cheek, the same perfunctory kiss he had been giving me for years, and went back to carving the turkey. The children were at the table already, eyes on their tablets, not moving when I said hello. I sat in my usual seat, the one at the end of the table, the one that let me see all of them at once. My son, his wife, my grandchildren, the family I had poured my entire life into building. And for a while, everything was fine. Normal. The way it had been for years. I don't remember what I was talking about when it happened. Something about Mark's childhood, probably. A story about a school play, or a lost tooth, or the time he fell out of a tree and I held him for an hour while he cried. The kind of story I had told 100 times before. The kind of story that once upon a time made everyone at the table smile. But this time, Mark put down his fork. He looked at me across the table, and in a voice that was calm, measured, almost casual, he said the words I would replay in my head for the next 48 hours. "You're just a burden now, Mom." He didn't whisper it. He didn't shout. He said it the way you might say the weather is turning cold or the traffic was bad today. A statement of fact. Something that needed to be said out loud, perhaps, but not something that required emotion. The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a family eating together, the sharp, sudden quiet of something breaking. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I could hear the children breathing, small and uncertain, not sure what had just happened, but knowing somehow that something had. I waited for him to take it back. For a joke, a smile, anything that would turn the words into something other than what they were. But he put down his fork, he cut another piece of turkey, he reached for the wine bottle and poured himself another glass. And Sarah laughed. A small, nervous laugh that she tried to cover with her napkin, but I heard it. The children heard it. Everyone at that table heard it. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had carried, fed, clothed, educated, housed, loved with every fiber of my being for 43 years. And I saw a stranger, someone who had forgotten, somewhere along the way, that I was not just a person who helped with down payments and babysat the grandchildren and brought pies on Sundays. I was the person who had given him everything. And in his mind, that made me a burden. "Excuse me," I said. That was all. Not anger, not tears, just 3 words spoken quietly, the way you might excuse yourself from a table of strangers whose conversation you no longer care to join. I walked to the front door. I put on my coat. I stepped out into the cold. The door closed behind me with a soft click. And for a moment, I stood on the porch and listened. Through the windows, I could hear them. The laughter starting again, the conversation resuming, the sound of my son's family returning to normal, as if I had never been there at all. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. I watched the lights in the house flicker and glow. And somewhere in the dark, I made a decision that I had never made before in my life. I decided to stop. The drive home took 43 minutes. I know because I counted. Not out of any need to measure time, but because I needed something to hold on to. Something that wasn't the words replaying in my head. Something that wasn't the memory of my son's voice, calm and final, telling me what I had become. "You're just a burden now, Mom." I turned the words in my mind like stones in a river, looking for the smooth edges. Was it the wine talking? Was he stressed about work? Had Sarah said something earlier, something I didn't hear that put him in a mood? I searched for explanations the way I had searched for explanations for every small cruelty, every forgotten birthday, every Sunday when no one asked about my week or noticed that I lost weight or seemed older than the week before. But somewhere around mile 12, I stopped searching. Something shifted in my chest. Not breaking, exactly, but settling. The way a house settles after a storm, when the winds stop and the walls stop shaking, and you realize with surprise that you're still standing. I thought about the house, the one I co-signed, the one where my name was on the mortgage alongside my son's. I thought about the years I had worked, the shifts I had pulled, the meals I had skipped, the trips I had never taken. I thought about the checks I had written, the loans I had taken, the savings I had emptied. I thought about the photograph of Thomas on my nightstand, the promise I had made to him on the night he died. And I realized something I had never let myself admit before. I had kept my promise. I had given Mark everything. And somewhere in the giving, I had given away something I never meant to lose. My apartment was quiet when I walked in. It was always quiet. A 1-bedroom with furniture from the 1990s, walls that needed painting, a kitchen so small I could stand in the middle and touch both counters. I'd lived there for 12 years, since I sold the family home after Thomas died. It was never supposed to be permanent, just a place to stay while I helped Mark get settled, while I saved a little more, while I figured out what came next. What came next was this: a small apartment, a quiet life, a calendar marked not with vacations or celebrations, but with doctor's appointments and the days I would see my grandchildren. I had given everything for Mark's life, and my own life had shrunk to fit the spaces he left behind. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I had written so many checks, balanced so many budgets, made so many plans. And for the first time in 30 years, I didn't think about Mark. I didn't think about what he needed or what he wanted or what I could give him. I thought about myself. I thought about the woman who had worked double shifts until her feet bled, the woman who drove the same car for 17 years, the woman who spent every Sunday at a table where her presence was tolerated, not celebrated, the woman who had just been told by her own son that she was a burden. I thought about her for a long time, and then I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the folder with the mortgage papers. The first day, the phone didn't ring. I had expected that. Mark and Sarah were busy. They had a life to live, children to raise, a house to maintain. My absence from Sunday dinner might have been noticed, but it wouldn't have been missed. Not yet. I spent the morning drinking coffee and staring at the mortgage documents. My name was on every page. Co-signer, co-borrower, legally responsible for a debt that wasn't mine, for a house I had never lived in, for a life I had built for someone else. I called my lawyer, an old friend named Margaret who had handled my will after Thomas died. She answered on the second ring, and when I told her what I wanted to do, she was quiet for a long moment. "Eleanor, are you sure? You've been on that mortgage for almost a decade. If you remove yourself, they'll have to refinance. Can they afford that?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the documents spread across my table. I thought about the 43 years of my life I had given to my son, and I thought about the words he had spoken the night before, the way he had looked at me across a table I had helped build and told me I was nothing more than a burden. "They can figure it out. They're adults," I said. The second day, the phone started ringing. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard it for the first time.
On the third day, I listened to the voicemails, not because I owed them anything, because I wanted to hear what 48 hours of silence had taught my son. The first messages were casual. "Hey, Mom, we missed you on Sunday. Give us a call." Mark's voice, unconcerned. The voice of a man who assumed his mother would always be there, that her absence was a temporary thing, a mood that would pass. Then they changed. "Mom, we're trying to refinance the house and the bank says you removed yourself from the mortgage? What's going on? Call me." Another. "Eleanor, it's Sarah. Mark said you're not returning his calls. The bank is giving us 30 days to refinance or we lose the house. You can't do this. Think about the children. Think about Emma and James. This is their home." Another. "Mom, please, I don't know what I did, but whatever it is, I'm sorry. Just call me back. We need to figure this out." The last voicemail was different. It came at 3 a.m. on the third day. Mark's voice was raw, broken in a way I had never heard before. He wasn't angry. He wasn't demanding. He was afraid. "Mom, I remember. The tree. When I fell out of the tree and you held me for an hour while I cried, I remember you told me it was okay, that the hurt would go away, that you would always be there to catch me. I remember you working double shifts. I remember you driving that old car forever so I could have a new one. I remember everything, Mom. I forgot for a while. I forgot what you gave up. I forgot what you gave me. Please, please just call me back. I need to hear your voice." I listened to Mark's voice crack on that 3 a.m. voicemail. I heard the fear in it, the desperation, the sudden, terrified understanding that the woman he had called a burden was the same woman who had held him for an hour when he fell out of a tree, the same woman who had worked double shifts so he could have a childhood, the same woman who had signed her name beside his on a mortgage that was never hers, for a house she would never live in, for a life she had built for him and not for herself. He remembered. It took him 48 hours of silence to remember. Not the years of sacrifice, not the hundreds of conversations where I had been interrupted, dismissed, made to feel small. Not the Sundays where I sat at the end of a table I had helped build and watched my family talk around me as if I wasn't there. It took the silence. It took the absence of my name on a piece of paper. It took the possibility of losing a house he had never really paid for to make him remember who I was. I should have felt vindicated. That's what the stories say, isn't it? The wronged mother finally gets her apology and her heart softens and she forgives and everything goes back to the way it was before. But I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in 30 years. I felt tired. Not the exhaustion of double shifts and empty bank accounts, a deeper tiredness. The tiredness of a woman who had spent her entire life proving her worth to people who had already decided she had none. I looked at my reflection in the window, and I asked myself a question I had never asked before. What do I want? Not what does Mark need, not what would make Sarah comfortable, not what is best for the grandchildren. What do I want, Eleanor Graham, after 43 years of giving everything to everyone else? The answer came slowly, the way answers come when you've spent a lifetime not asking the question. I want to wake up in the morning and not wonder if I'm going to be welcome at my own son's table. I want to drink my coffee without checking my phone for messages I'm dreading. I want to walk into a room and not shrink myself to fit the space other people have left for me. I want to stop being a burden to myself. Margaret was surprised to see me. I had called her 3 days earlier to discuss removing myself from the mortgage, but I hadn't told her everything. Now I sat in her office, the morning sun slanting through the blinds, and I told her what I wanted. I'm disinheriting Mark completely. Margaret's pen stopped moving. She looked at me over her glasses, the way she used to look at me when we were younger and I was making a decision she thought I might regret. Eleanor, she said carefully, are you sure? You've talked about leaving the house to the grandchildren, about making sure Mark is taken care of. I've spent 30 years making sure Mark is taken care of. He has a house, he has a career, he has a wife and children and a life that I built for him with my own hands. He doesn't need my money. He needs to learn what it feels like to stand on his own 2 feet. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly and picked up her pen again. What do you want to do with the estate? I had thought about this, more than I had thought about anything in years. I want to establish a scholarship for nursing students, single mothers, if possible, women who are working double shifts and driving old cars and trying to build a future for their children. I want them to have something I never had, a hand up, not a handout, a chance to build something for themselves without losing themselves in the process. I signed the papers that afternoon. The will, the scholarship fund, the documents removing my name from the mortgage. Each signature felt like a door closing, but not the way I had expected. I had spent my life opening doors for other people, pushing them through, holding them open, standing in the doorway while they walked through to their futures. Now I was closing doors, and in the quiet that followed, I realized I had been standing in a doorway my entire life, never quite stepping through to my own. The scholarship would be called the Thomas Graham Memorial Fund, my husband's name, the man who had died too young, who had never gotten to see what I built for his son, who had left me with a promise and a 7-year-old boy and a lifetime of work ahead of me. I thought he would understand. I thought he would be proud, not because I was punishing Mark, but because I was finally choosing myself. When I walked out of Margaret's office, the world looked different. The same buildings, the same streets, the same people going about their lives. But I was different. I was Eleanor Graham, not Mark's mother, not the woman who co-signed the mortgage, not the burden at the end of the table, just Eleanor, a retired nurse, a widow, a woman who had given everything and was finally, at 71 years old, deciding to keep something for herself. The phone was in my bag. It had been ringing all morning. I didn't need to. I knew what the messages would say. More apologies, more explanations, more reasons why I should come back and fix everything and make it all better. But I was done fixing. I was done making things better for people who made me feel small. I walked to my car. I got in, and I drove. Not home, not to Mark's house. South, towards the ocean. I had always wanted to see, but never had the time, the money, the permission to visit.
I drove for hours. The city fell away behind me. The highways opened up, flat and endless. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't driving towards someone else's needs. I was driving toward my own. I found a place on the coast, a small apartment, nothing fancy, white walls and a balcony that faced the ocean. The landlord was a woman named Patricia, retired like me, who asked no questions when I paid the first month's rent in cash. She handed me the keys, showed me where the laundry was, and told me the best place to buy fresh fish was the market on 3rd Street. Then she left me alone. That first night, I sat on the balcony and watched the sun set over the water. The sky turned pink, then orange, then a deep purple that faded into stars. I hadn't seen stars in years. The city lights had drowned them out, and I had been too tired to drive somewhere dark enough to see them. But here, away from everything, the sky was full of them. Thousands, millions. A reminder of how small I was and how large the world could be when you stopped shrinking to fit other people's expectations. The calls continued for a while. Mark, Sarah, a few numbers I didn't recognize, friends probably, or other family members recruited to convince me to come back. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I had heard what I needed to hear. The rest was just noise. Instead, I built a new life. I volunteered at a free clinic 2 days a week, helping people who couldn't afford care. It wasn't the hospital. It wasn't double shifts and exhaustion. It was quiet work, meaningful work, work that reminded me why I had become a nurse in the first place. Not for the money, for the feeling of being useful, for the small moments when someone looked at me and said, "Thank you," really meant it, and I didn't have to wonder if I was being tolerated or loved. I walked on the beach every morning, the same stretch of sand, the same waves, the same seagulls following the same patterns. It was repetitive, meditative. Each step felt like letting go of something I had been carrying for too long. The exhaustion, the guilt, the constant low-grade fear that I wasn't doing enough, giving enough, being enough for people who had stopped seeing me at all. One morning, about a month after I arrived, I got a call from Margaret. The house on Maple Street had been sold. Mark and Sarah couldn't afford the refinancing. They had tried to make it work, but without my name on the mortgage, my credit history, and my savings backing them up, the bank had turned them down. They had 30 days to vacate. They were moving to a smaller place, a rental on the other side of the city. "Eleanor," Margaret said, her voice careful, "are you okay?" I looked at the ocean. The waves kept coming, the same rhythm they had kept for millions of years. They didn't care about mortgages or family dinners or sons who forgot their mothers. They just kept coming, steady and endless, and I found something comforting in that. The world kept turning, the waves kept crashing, and I was still here, still standing, still breathing. "I'm fine, Margaret," I said, and for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. I didn't hear from Mark for a long time after that. Months. The calls stopped, the voicemails stopped. I told myself I didn't care, and for a while, I almost believed it. I had my apartment, I had the clinic, I had the ocean, the mornings on the beach, the quiet evenings with a book and a cup of tea. I had a life that was mine, finally, and I told myself that was enough. But I'm his mother, and no matter what he said, no matter what he did, that never stopped being true. I thought about him often. Not the man who called me a burden. That man was a stranger. I thought about the boy he had been, the one who used to climb into my bed after nightmares, who held my hand crossing the street until he was almost too old to be seen holding his mother's hand, who cried on my shoulder the night his father died and asked me with a seriousness that broke my heart if I would be okay. I thought about that boy, and I wondered what had happened to him. When had he become someone who looked at me across a table and saw only inconvenience? I don't have an answer to that question. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe the boy who needed me grew into a man who resented needing anyone, and I was the easiest target for that resentment. Maybe Sarah's influence changed him, or the pressure of providing for a family he couldn't really afford, or just the slow erosion of gratitude that comes when you're given something for so long you forget it was a gift at all. Maybe it was all of those things. Maybe it was none of them. Maybe the truth is simpler and sadder. He forgot who I was because I forgot who I was first. The letter came on a Tuesday, handwritten in an envelope with no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. The same looping letters from 100 school projects, 1,000 notes left on the kitchen table. I opened it with hands that trembled just a little, and I read the words my son had written. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll forgive me. I don't know if you should, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the words I said. I'm sorry for the years I made you feel small. I'm sorry for forgetting everything you gave me. I'm sorry for making you think you were a burden, when the truth is, I was the burden. I was the one who took everything you had and asked for more. I was the one who stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a resource, a safety net, a check I could cash when I needed something. We lost the house. I know you know that. We're in a rental now, smaller than the apartment you lived in for 12 years. Sarah is working. The kids are adjusting. It's not the life I planned for them, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe they needed to see what happens when you forget where you came from, when you forget who loved you first. I don't know if you'll ever speak to me again. I don't know if I deserve to hear your voice, but I want you to know that I remember now. The tree, the double shifts, the car you drove for 17 years, the checks you wrote without hesitation, the Sundays you sat at my table while we talked around you like you weren't there. I remember everything, Mom, and I'm so, so sorry it took losing everything to remember. I love you, Mom. I always have. I just forgot for a while. Mark. I read that letter 100 times, maybe more. I kept it in my pocket for weeks, pulling it out when I walked on the beach, when I sat on my balcony, when I lay in bed at night and stared at the ceiling. I memorized every word. I looked for the lies, the manipulation, the words he thought I wanted to hear, but I didn't find any. I found my son, the boy I had raised, the man he had become after losing everything he thought he needed. I didn't call him, not right away. I needed time. I needed to be sure that if I opened that door again, I wouldn't walk through it and lose myself the way I had before. I needed to know that I was Eleanor first, Mark's mother second, that I had a life of my own now, a life I had built without him, a life I would keep even if he walked back into it. It took 6 months. 6 months of mornings on the beach, afternoons at the clinic, evenings with a book and a cup of tea. 6 months of understanding who I was when I wasn't giving everything to someone else. 6 months of understanding that love and sacrifice are not the same thing. That you can love someone without giving yourself away. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. And then, one morning, about a month after I arrived, I called him. "Hello, Mark." His voice cracked when he said my name. "Mom." Just one word, but it carried everything. The years, the mistakes, the silence, the love that had never really gone away, just gotten buried under everything else. "I read your letter," I said. The ocean was behind me, endless and blue. The sun was rising, the world was starting a new day, and so was I. "I want you to know that I forgive you, but I need you to understand something first." "Anything," he said, and I believed him. "I'm not the same woman I was when I walked out of your house. I won't be that woman again. I can't be. I spent 30 years giving you everything I had, and I don't regret it. But I'm done giving away pieces of myself. If you want me in your life, you need to see me, really see me. Not as a resource, not as a safety net, as your mother, as a woman who has her own life, her own needs, her own worth. Do you understand?" There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the distance between us, the miles, the months, the mistakes. And then he spoke. "I understand, Mom. I see you. I'm sorry it took so long, but I see you now."
I closed my eyes. The sun was warm on my face, the waves were steady, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never let myself feel before. Not pride in what I had given, not satisfaction in being needed, just peace. The simple, profound peace of a woman who had finally, after 43 years, chosen herself. Eleanor Graham never went back to the house on Maple Street.